Kelly, so much for joining me. I just wanted to take a minute and ask you a couple of questions because you were like the OG original carnivore and everybody loves you and respects your opinion and respects how you feel and your advice. So I just wanted to ask you about the carnivore diet. We get lots of comments on our YouTube channel and on Instagram about how this isn't sustainable. So how long have you been doing the carnivore diet?
Well, 13 years, but I definitely learned from other people who, in my book, are the OGs, like Charles Washington and Dana Spencer. They were already there doing it. But yes, 13 years, and thank you.
And how long were you low carb before that?
I was almost carnivore for 5 years before that. I just included diet sodas, some artificial sweeteners, and like pickles. But so yeah, almost carnivore, 18 years now.
So that's a really long time to not have carbs, and you're not dead yet. What do you think? Do you think that the carnivore diet or an extremely low carb diet is sustainable and healthy?
I honestly can't imagine any other diet being sustainable. I tried very low calorie, I tried plant-based, I tried running more, moving more, eating less. None of that was sustainable. I could lose weight doing any of them and then would gain more back because it wasn't sustainable. But this, I'm eating the most nutrient-dense foods that there are. In my opinion, the most delicious foods that there are. I'm not missing any essential vitamins, nutrients. I don't have to go hungry. I don't limit myself. I just feel amazing. What could be more sustainable than that? When people say that, I'm like, what are you eating that you think would be easier to sustain than all I want of delicious animal products? I can't think of a thing.
I agree 100%. Because of everybody's negative comments, I just wanted to ask you about things like heart disease and high cholesterol. Did those things ever concern you? Were you ever worried about that?
Well, I did some research because you have to really think outside of the box of everything we've been told for a while. So I have a CAC, coronary artery calcium score of 0. And there's some really remarkable research that shows now that if you have a CAC score of 0, no matter how high your LDL is, you're good. You are statistically not at risk. It turns out that my LDL is not even high though. So for me, my own doctor is like, wow, your numbers are textbook. But I do see that there are some carnivores where their doctors panic. And I'm like, ask for a literal scan, find out what's going on there if you're concerned. And I have known this is supposed to be impossible. It is not supposed to be possible to lower your CAC score. You can find that online, but I personally know people on a carnivore diet who have documentation they have done it. So no, I'm not concerned at all at this point.
Former binge eater, and I've been there too. Why do you think the carnivore diet or a very low carb diet works for people that were binge eaters or had eating disorders?
Processed foods override our satiety and can very easily cause us to just eat more and more and more. When you remove the additives, the chemicals, the dyes, the junk, it's so much easier to just feel satisfied. But then also, I've definitely had some binges on carnivore food where I ate too much and it felt uncomfortable. And then what? I didn't get sick the next day. I felt fine. Like I overate, but it didn't cause blood sugar craziness. It didn't lead to like, oh gosh, the guilt, the shame. It was steak. It's fine. I ate too much. Move on. It just means it's probably going to be longer till I'm hungry the next day. No big deal. For me, by this point, it has really just allowed me to eat to satiety. I don't do fasting in part because I did have a binge eating fast, and the restriction leads to, it's just part of the same cycle, restriction and binging. So for me, I'm eating typically 3 meals per day where I am completely satisfied. I no longer have any desire for a binge.
Absolutely. And then one more question. So I'm sure that you have seen the information about the person newly appointed to the Dietary Guidelines Committee for the United States. Her name is Fatima Stanford, and she is an obesity specialist. And she was recently on 60 Minutes. And basically what she said, I'm going to paraphrase, but basically what she said is that if you were born into a household where your parents are obese, you have a 50 to 85% chance of being obese, and nothing that you do matters, not diet, exercise, sleep, or stress. And I just want to get your take on that, because you come from a past where you were pretty overweight.
Yes.
And you She says it's genetic and there's nothing you can do about it.
Oh, well, I do have some people in my family that have struggled with their weight. And I was frequently told as a kid that I look just like my dad. And by the way, my dad is a low carber now and he looks fantastic. He's not carnivore, but he eats a lot of meat and he does not eat carbs. There probably is a genetic component, just like there is to everything. But also families tend to eat the same foods. We're at the same table. If one person is eating a lot of sugar and carbs, so is everyone else most likely. My brother and I grew up at the same table, though. He was skinny as a rail growing up, and I was definitely not. So part of it is the food. There probably is a genetic component. However, what do you do with the genes that you're given? Oh my gosh, our food, our sleep, our stress. It's huge how much we can actually change. If I were to go back to the diet I had before, I would go right back to obesity exactly like before. No doubt in my mind whatsoever. None.
You're not changing your genetics, and you didn't change your genetics when you started carnivore and low carb and were able to lose all that weight. So, and then there's that saying that genetics load the gun and diet and exercise pull the trigger.
Yeah. I know. I think there's a lot of truth to that. And probably for most anything, there probably are people who are more prone to diabetes or more prone to this or to that. But then, if we're eating the right foods, moving our bodies, getting sun, talking out past traumas, doing, so many steps that we can do that make it so much less likely that we're going to actually suffer from those things.
Yeah. And if you turn that around, she says, if you're overweight, you're probably never going to be thin because of your genetics. And if that were true, we have to turn that around and say, if you're thin and you come from a thin family, you can't be overweight either. And we know that's not true too. So
it's not true. That's a good point. Okay. Thank you. All right.